Hi students. Topic today is sense of pain and temperature by Dr. Samhani. Physiologically, pain is a protective phenomenon of the nature. Experience of pain, with or without a disease, is almost universal. Pain, either due to punishment or due to natural injury, leaves a scar in the memory. Pain is expressed in different terms and languages. Usually, it is described like throbbing, burning, piercing, excruciating, lacerating, aching, etc. However, often it is difficult to describe the exact feeling of pain. It is said that pain is better felt than expressed. There are 3 learning objectives. First, describe the nociceptive system. Second, explain the analgesic systems and the mechanism of referred pain. Third, describe the consequences of abnormalities in nociception. Pain is defined as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage or described in terms of such damage. This is the definition of pain given by International Association for the Study of Pain, IASP. The classic nociceptive pathway involves 3 types of neurons. Primary sensory neurons in the peripheral nervous system, which conduct painful sensations from the periphery to the dorsal root of the spinal cord. Secondary sensory neurons in the spinal cord or brainstem, which transmit the painful sensation to the thalamus. Tertiary sensory neurons, which transmit the painful sensation from the thalamus to the somatosensory areas of the cerebral cortex. Pain plays an important in the survival of all animals. It acts as a signal, alerting us to potential tissue damage, and leads to a wide range of actions to prevent or limit further damage. Physiologically, pain occurs when sensory nerve endings called nociceptors, also referred to as pain receptors, come into contact with a painful or noxious stimulus. The resulting nerve impulse travels from the sensory nerve ending to the spinal cord, where the impulse is rapidly shunted to the brain via nerve tracts in the spinal cord and brainstem. The brain processes the pain sensation and quickly responds with a motor response in an attempt to cease the action causing the pain. Let's see this video.
In this video, we're going to talk about pain. Now, pain is pretty important for us in that it's a sort of defense mechanism telling our body something is wrong. But pain can persist, and this is when it might cause some problems. So how do we feel pain, such as a joint injury from a sport or a punch in the face? Well, there are special nerve cell endings that initiate the sensation of pain all around our body. These nerve cells are known as nociceptors. Right now, here I am drawing the central nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, and the brainstem, because these are important in pain registration as well, and feeling pain. To understand more about how we feel pain, we must first review the spinal cord as well, and its general anatomy. Because the spinal cord is like a relay station where the information about pain, temperature, pressure from the periphery, meaning the skin, the joint, and the muscles, can travel up to the brain. So here is a structure of the spinal cord. The barriers of the spinal cord as well as the brain from the inside is the pia mater, arachnoid, and dura mater. All these are collectively known as the meninges. Now, if you have a cross-section of the spinal cord, like on the top here, there's usually a butterfly-shaped gray matter with the white matter around it. The white matter contains the axons of the nerve cells, while the gray matter contains the cell bodies of the nerve cells itself. Now, the funny thing is, the brain actually has the white matter in the center and then the gray matter around, so it's the opposite to the spinal cord. And then in the center here, this round thing, we have the central canal, which actually contains cerebrospinal fluid, which is important fluid for nourishing the central nervous system, that is the spinal cord and the brain. Now these red tracks I'm drawing right now are nerve fibers. These tracks are coming out from the front of the spinal cord, the front. When they are in the front, they are called motor fibers, meaning that these fibers carry information out of the spinal cord, not into the spinal cord. So information is leaving out, as indicated by this black arrow here. Then the fibers connect. Then we have fibers connecting at the dorsal aspect of the spinal cord, the back, and these are the sensory fibers. These fibers transmit information into the spinal cord, so towards the spinal cord, which then can go to the brain. The main thing to take out of this diagram is the sensory fibers and how it brings in information to the back of the spinal cord, the dorsal side of the spinal cord, and then this information can then travel up towards the brain from the spinal cord. Now that we know about these sensory fibers, a bit about it, let's see how we sense pain, how sensation of pain begins. Let's just say a big nail has penetrated the skin in the trunk area of this human here. What would happen from here? Well, underneath our skins, in the periphery, which also includes the joints and the muscles, we have these cells known as nociceptors. These are the pain-sensing nerve cells. When a noxious stimuli occurs, such as the big nail penetrating our body, there will be chemicals released by immune cells and all of these other factors which essentially stimulate these nociceptors. When the nociceptors are stimulated, they will then propagate this information about this pain to the spinal cord nearby. So let's just take a cross section of the spinal cord here. The nociceptors will bring this pain information into the spinal cord from the dorsal horn, which is the back of the spinal cord. Because remember, the sensory fibers are at the dorsal side of the spinal cord, as we learned just before. They bring information from the back to the back of the spinal cord. The nociceptors will then release chemicals here, pain neurotransmitters, such as substance P. Then a second neuron, called the second order neuron, will receive this information and then cross over inside the spinal cord, so to the opposite side of the spinal cord, and then bring this information towards the brain. Now, before continuing on with this second order neuron, we must understand that there are actually two types of nociceptors. The first is the alpha delta fibers. These are very small myelinated nerve cells that produce fast, well-localized, sharp pain. Then you have the C fibers, which are smaller and are unmyelinated and produce slow, poorly localized pain. The C fibers are the fibers that produce the burning type throbbing pain that some people have experienced. The nociceptors can also be referred to as the afferent nerve fibers because it is bringing information into the spinal cord to the second order neuron. Anyways, if that made sense, continuing on. So the second order neuron will bring this pain information through the spinal cord towards the brain. It will travel to the brain via the spinothalamic tract or pathway. The name thalamic implies the thalamus, which is an area of the brain. So this tract will go towards the thalamus in the brain, basically. But why is it called the spinothalamic tract? Well, because the spinal cord have areas that bring the nerves straight to the thalamus. These areas are collectively known as the spinothalamic tract here. So the second order neuron will bring this pain information through via the spinothalamic tract in the spinal cord to the thalamus of the brain. Looking at it at a big picture, The second order neuron is traveling up the spinal cord towards the thalamus of the brain via the spinal thalamic tract. Here I am drawing a cross-section of the brain. This red area is the thalamus. The thalamus is also known as the relay station as well. If you know your brain, there are areas in the cortex of the brain, the outer part of the brain, that are associated with sensation. So touch, feeling of touch. This area is called the somatosensory cortex. Now, along the somatosensory cortex are specific areas related to specific parts of the body. So, for example, here I am drawing a simple diagram of body parts that correlate with that area of the somatosensory cortex. So here are the somatosensory cortex areas where we feel the trunk, our body, the trunk, our head, hand, thumb, and face. The body parts, as you can see, look quite disproportionate. As you can see, the face sensation area covers a massive part of the somatosensory cortex compared to the hand, for example. So you can say that our face is more sensitive. We can feel more sensations in our face than in our hands. So if we make an actual human figure out of this, we would call it a homunculus. Thus, this whole diagram I'm drawing can therefore be called a homunculus of primary somatosensory cortex. Now, to make things even more difficult, this is the left side of the brain, and here is the right. We would, of course, also have a somatosensory cortex on the right side of the brain, because it's symmetrical. So here we have, again, the trunk, the hands, blah, 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 blah. Now you might ask yourself, why are we talking about the homunculus, the primary somatosensory cortex, this diagram? Well, it's because the location of where the pain has occurred correlates to the area of the somatosensory cortex, one of these areas. So what happens is, this second order neuron, which is on the left side of the brain, will pass on the pain information to another neuron by releasing neurotransmitters. The second order neuron will pass it on to a third order neuron in the thalamus. And this is where the location and discrimination of pain then occurs. In this case, the third order neuron is locating the pain to be within the trunk area, which is true because if you remember, the nail penetrated the trunk area of the body. As shown by the picture here, the location and discrimination of pain is on the left side of the brain. The question I ask is, why is it not on the right side of the brain? Well, it's because if we look back to where the nociceptor and the second order neuron synapsed, the second order neuron, which was on the right side, crossed over to the left side and then ascended to the left side of the brain. So we can say that pain on the right side of the body is processed on the left side of the brain, and vice versa. If pain is coming from the left side of the body, it will be processed on the right side of the brain. Finally, everything that we just saw, from when the noxious stimuli stimulates the nociceptors to where the location and discrimination of pain occurred in the brain, this is all called the ascending pathway because it's going up. Now, there's also a descending pathway. There are other nerves that actually regulate and modulate the ascending pathway of pain here. These are the inhibitory descending pathway, which goes down. And this is directly linked to the gate theory of pain area, which is located in the spinal cord. But we won't talk about that in this video. This video was just an overview of how we feel pain. But it's important to know that there are regulatory neurons and stuff that regulate the pain pathway up to the brain. Hopefully in the next video we'll go more into depth of pain and look at the modulation, regulation, and other stuff which is interesting.
Pain plays an important in the survival of all animals. It acts as a signal, alerting us to potential tissue damage, and leads to a wide range of actions to prevent or limit further damage. Physiologically, pain occurs when sensory nerve endings called nociceptors, also referred to as pain receptors, come into contact with a painful or noxious stimulus. The resulting nerve impulse travels from the sensory nerve ending to the spinal cord, where the impulse is rapidly shunted to the brain via nerve tracts in the spinal cord and brainstem. The brain processes the pain sensation and quickly responds with a motor response in an attempt to cease the action causing the pain. To learn about the pain and nociception and analgesia, please enjoy this video.
Hello and welcome to Sutton Brain Hub's series of interactive videos on pain physiology. This series of videos will focus purely on pain physiology and will assume prior knowledge of spinal tracts and other anatomical structures. Video 1. Pain and nociception. In this video we will cover the following objectives. We will define pain. We will aim to understand different types of pain. We will define nociception, learn some key noxious stimuli, and understand peripheral pain sensation and further sensitization mechanisms. To begin with, let's start with some definitions. The International Association for the Study of Pain defines pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage, or described in terms of such damage. However, due to it being such a complex and subjective phenomenon, defining pain has been a huge challenge. In medical diagnosis, pain is regarded as a symptom of an underlying condition. Pain is a universal experience, but there are many different types of pain and many ways of expressing the sensation. The way pain is described scientifically can be considered either temporally or physiologically. So in terms of temporal pain, you can have acute pain or short-term pain versus chronic pain or long-term pain. Physiologically, pain can be further subdivided. It can be considered either peripheral or central, or inflammatory or neuropathic, as in physical damage compared to nervous damage, or somatic versus visceral, where somatic pain is sharp and well localized, and visceral pain is more achy and poorly localized. The sensation of pain, and particularly acute somatic pain, is due to nociception. Nociception is defined as the process of noxious transmission. Nociceptors have a minimum threshold of stimulation that must be reached before an action potential is generated. However, nociception is not an all or nothing phenomenon. Increased and more frequent stimulation causes greater nociception, thus greater pain sensation, compared to less frequent stimulation, as you can see in the graphs before you. The red line on the graphs denotes the minimum point of stimulation that's required to generate an action potential. The sensation of pain, and particularly acute pain, is due to this nociception. Nociception is performed by nociceptors. A nociceptor is a free nerve ending at the end of a sensory neuron. They respond to potentially harmful or damaging stimuli, i.e. noxious stimuli. They're found in the skin, muscle, bone, tendon, ligaments, and viscera of the body. However, some body tissues do not have nociceptors. For example, the brain. However, blood vessels within the brain do have nociceptors. There is a variety of different substances released by damaged cells which can stimulate nociceptive fibers. For example, prostaglandins, histamine, ATP, bradykinin, serotonin, and H+ ions. Upon detection of noxious stimuli, The nociceptors generate an action potential at the distal end of the first-order neuron. This action potential then travels to the central nervous system. Some nociceptor fibers have specialized receptors in the periphery. Therefore, these fibers will only depolarize upon the presentation of a particular stimulus. For example, there are thermal receptors, such as TRPV1, that is stimulated by heat. This receptor is also stimulated by capsaicin, which is commonly found in chilies, explaining why chilies feel hot. There are also mechanical receptors, which respond to crushing, incisions, and breaks in the skin, and chemical receptors, which respond to caustic or irritating molecules exposed to the skin. The stimulation threshold of all nociceptors can be reduced by local inflammatory factors. This process is called sensitization. Following nociception, I'll now talk a little bit about peripheral pain. Peripheral pain is the sensation of pain that you commonly feel following an injury. It is sharp, well localized, and associated with the signs of inflammation, such as redness, swelling, and loss of function. Following injury, inflammatory mediators are released. This response is aimed at promoting healing, and the pain sensation can be modified by anti-inflammatory drugs such as non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, or NSAIDs for short. If the peripheral nociceptors are stimulated for a longer period of time, peripheral sensitization can occur. This is a result of the long-term release of inflammatory mediators and neuropeptides locally, which can increase the excitability of the nociceptors due to changes in the structure of the neuron membranes. The pseudo-unipolar first-order sensory neurons produce these inflammatory mediators, such as substance P and CGRP, in their cell bodies, and they are transported to either end of the neuron, both peripherally and centrally, causing the sensitization. I will cover this peripheral sensitization in greater depth in a moment. Increased sensitivity to pain can be known as hyperalgesia. Specifically, this is excess pain sensation from a lower intensity noxious stimulus that usually would not cause such pain. Damage to tissues and repeated activation of nociceptors is what causes this peripheral sensitization. Sensitization is a normal process and it's meant to happen. It enables more effective healing and also induces protection of the injury, and it can be divided into two categories. Primary peripheral sensitization occurs at the site of the injury. Then you have secondary peripheral sensitization, which occurs around the site of the injury. Damaged cells release these inflammatory mediators locally, and these inflammatory mediators that I mentioned earlier can further activate silent neurons locally, and these neurons can further act to sensitize nociceptors, so nociceptors are even more sensitive to noxious stimuli. Again, I can give you a list here of the common local inflammatory mediators in the periphery. As you can see on the graph, this brings that activation threshold of the peripheral nociceptors down. This therefore implies that the depolarization will occur more easily with less stimulation required, thus causing greater pain sensation. Now, this peripheral sensitization happens very quickly. It can be a matter of seconds or minutes for this to occur. Slow peripheral sensitization occurs as a result of the activities of substance P and CGRP. Substance P is produced in the cell body in the dorsal root ganglia of the nociceptive fibers. This production is stimulated by the firing of the nociceptive fiber. This substance P first travels to the periphery and is released, it can have two actions. One action of substance P is to induce mast cell and neutrophil degranulation, resulting in the release of prostaglandins and histamine, which can further induce nociception and sensitization. Furthermore, substance P can directly cause vasodilation, causing the inflammation that you see locally, and it further inducing mast cell and other immune cell recruitment to the site of the injury. This causes further local degranulation, resulting in increased prostaglandin and histamine release, causing even further nociception and sensitization of the peripheral nociceptive fiber. As well as substance P, CGRP, or calcitonin gene-related peptide, is also produced by the cell body of peripheral nociceptive fibers, and also travels to the periphery. In the periphery, it acts as a potent vasodilator. This allows the infiltration of leukocytes and immunoglobulins to the site of the injury. This, as mentioned earlier, leads to further nociception and sensitization of the nociceptive fiber. So, to recap, this video should have enabled you to define pain and different types of pain, define nociception, name key noxious stimuli and other molecules associated with nociception, and understand peripheral pain sensation and the specific actions of CGRP and substance P.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our third video in this series about physiology of pain. In this video, we look at an interesting topic called referred pain and the mechanism and theories behind it. Then we will take a quick look at a process called hyperalgesia. Starting with referred pain. So referred pain is a term used to describe pain that is not felt on the site or tissue that got the damage, but it is felt on other side on the body far from the origin. Pain is referred in most of the time according to the dermatomal distribution, and we talked about dermatomal distribution in our previous video. Now we will look at this dermatomal body map and we will take examples for referred pain. Example number 1. Pain coming from the heart tissue or the myocytes, the heart muscles, is referred to many sites like the epigastrium, the skin of the whole chest, we call it the pericardium, the inner aspect of the left arm, and sometimes even to the lower jaw. When we look at this dermatomal map, we find that these sites are innervated by the same nerve roots coming out of the third cervical segment till the fifth thoracic spinal cord segment. So we say, for example, pain of myocardial infarction is referred to the lower jaw, neck, or the left arm and shoulder, or the epigastrium for a specific patient. Another example is the diaphragm, and in this case the pain is referred to the tip of the shoulders. Pain from inflamed appendix is referred to the whole abdomen due to the peritoneal irritation by the appendix, but it is felt stronger in the center of the abdomen, or we call it the umbilicus or the umbilicus. So we say pain of acute appendicitis is referred from the right iliac fossa to the area around the umbilicus or the central area of the abdomen. Other example is the kidneys, where pain is referred to the area of the costovertebral line, or we call it area. Pain for the ureters is referred to the testicles, while pain from the trigone of the bladder is referred to the tip of the penis. Another example is the toothache, or we call it tooth pain, and it's one of the most noxious type of pain. It's referred to the head, also inflamed nasal sinuses, middle ear, or intracranial mass. All of these are contributing factors for causing headache, overexposure of the eyes to the light, or even emotional stress, which is not even physical but causes the pain we call headache. Now let's take a general look in trying to explain the mechanism of referred pain. So we have two afferents from two different sides, but they carry pain impulses to the same spinal cord segment. A misinterpretation takes place because the number of afferents coming from the skin is much more in number than afferents coming from the viscera. So pain impulses, when reaching the brain, it will read it like this. A lot of pain signals coming from the skin, meaning a high intensity stimulation. A few pain signals coming from the viscera, resulting in a low intensity impulses, or moderate pain we could call it. And this is what we call error of projection or secondary hyperalgesia, because the skin in this case is healthy but still sending pain impulses and highly sensitive to pain. Now there are two theories explaining the phenomenon of referred pain. The first one is more of anatomical explanation of the phenomenon, and it's called the convergence theory. Convergence theory states that pain afferents or the nociceptors from two different sides having their cell bodies on the dorsal root ganglia converge together and send impulses to the same second order neuron. Misinterpretation occurs, and because the skin is more exposed to stimulation and have larger area of presentation in the brain map, the brain's encoding to this sensory information coming is like a severe pain coming from the skin and a mild pain coming from the viscera itself. And as we mentioned, we call this error of projection. Then other theory explaining this phenomenon is more of physiological explanation. It's called the facilitation theory, and it states that pain afferents coming from the skin always carry impulses, but these impulses are weak and does not produce pain. We call it subthreshold partial depolarization or local potential. Now when tissue damage happens to the viscera innervated by the same spinal cord segments as the skin, then afferents from this viscera will send subthreshold signals just like the skin. And then summation of these electrical potentials is what produces action potential. Action potential is then conducted through its pain pathway till reaching the brain, which will encode it as pain coming from the skin. Now that we are done with the concept of referred pain, let's take a quick look into the concept of hyperalgesia. So hyperalgesia is the hypersensitivity of a tissue in the body to pain stimulation. Hyperalgesia could be primary hyperalgesia, where the release of chemicals like histamine and prostaglandins after tissue injury results in lowering the threshold of this damaged tissue to pain, making it hypersensitive even to touch sometimes. Example of this is the hypersensitivity of a sunburned skin to touch. Then we have secondary hyperalgesia. In secondary hyperalgesia, facilitation from other damaged area occurs, what we call referred pain, causing the skin in most of the time to be hypersensitive to pain signals. In this case, applying of local anesthetic to the skin might be helpful in easing the pain, which also prove the correctness of the facilitation theory. And so guys, that's it for this video. Our next video we will look at the gate control theory, the opiate system, and management of pain. So thanks for watching, and we see you next time.
The gate control theory of pain is a mechanism in the spinal cord in which pain signals can be sent up to the brain to be processed to accentuate the possible perceived pain, or attenuate it at the spinal cord itself. The gate is the mechanism where pain signals can be let through or restricted. One of two things can happen. The gate can be open, or the gate can be closed. If the gate is open, pain signals can pass through and will be sent to the brain to perceive the pain. If the gate is closed, pain signals will be restricted from traveling up to the brain, and the sensation of pain won't be perceived.
The gate control theory of pain states that the transmission of pain signals can be modulated at the spinal cord level by non-painful inputs as well as descending signals from the brain. Non-painful inputs typically close the gate to painful inputs, reducing pain. Pain sensation is mediated by pain receptors or nociceptors, which are essentially nerve endings of first-order neurons in the pain pathway. The axons of these neurons form small diameter nerve fibers of two types: fast fibers A delta, responsible for the initial sharp pain perceived at the time of injury, and slow C fibers, responsible for a dull, longer-lasting pain. First-order neurons travel by way of spinal nerves to the spinal cord, where they synapse with second-order neurons, which, together with third-order neurons, carry pain signals to the brain. However, according to the gate theory of pain, perception of pain is not simply due to stimulation of nociceptors. There is a so-called nerve gate located in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord that controls the passage of pain signals to the brain. This nerve gate consists essentially of interneurons that inhibit second-order neurons, thereby stopping or reducing signal transmission. When nociceptors are activated, they stimulate second-order neurons and, at the same time, inhibit the inhibitory interneurons, thus opening the gate, allowing transmission of pain signals. Now, if the area is also stimulated by other non-noxious stimuli such as touch, pressure, or changes of temperature, a different type of nerve fiber, large diameter A beta, is activated, and this reactivates the inhibitory neurons, stopping the transmission of pain signals. This mechanism underlies the pain-relieving effect of skin rubbing or heat or cold packs. It is also the basis of pain treatment procedures such as transcutaneous nerve stimulation, which delivers a small electrical current to activate non-nociceptive receptors in the skin. The brain can also send signals to the spinal cord to modulate the pain gate. Examples of such signals are endorphins, morphine-like substances released by the brain in response to pain. In addition to lowering pain perception by the brain, endorphins reduce transmission of pain signals between the first and second-order neurons by two mechanisms: preventing the release of a key neurotransmitter, substance P, and inhibiting action potentials in postsynaptic neurons. Production of endorphins may be induced by a number of factors, including pleasurable activities, excitement, meditation, laughter, and vigorous exercise. Endorphins' action underlies the pain-relieving effect of physical exercise, positive state of mind, and explains, for example, why athletes may not feel pain from an injury until the exciting game is over.
Pain can be modulation by physical therapy. Physiotherapy modalities can alert pain perception with chronic musculoskeletal pain CMP through decrease in temporal summation, increase conditioned pain modulation, slight improvement in central sensitization, manual therapy, strengthening exercises, transcranial magnetic stimulation or direct current stimulation. Transcranial magnetic stimulation or direct current stimulation is an important modality to reduce perception in chronic pain conditions and proved to have a significant difference when compared to a sham technique. The precentral cortical area of the motor cortex is the most target area for pain modulation. Transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, TENS. TENS mechanism depend on gate control theory, release of endorphins and encephalin. Acupuncture. Acupuncture is used as a complementary modality for pain management, and its mechanism depends on releasing of endogenous opioids, serotonin, and norepinephrine.
Central nervous system mechanisms of pain modulation. Brainstem modulatory systems play a major role in pain facilitation. Descending pain modulatory neurons in the rostral ventral medial medulla and DLPT inhibit nociceptive transmission by several mechanisms: direct inhibition of projection neurons, inhibition of transmitter release from primary afferents, excitation of inhibitory interneurons, and inhibition of excitatory interneurons. Functional studies show that these modulatory systems can exert bidirectional control of pain in response to higher-order factors, such as fear, attention, and expectation. Opioid peptide synthesizing cells and opioid receptors are distributed throughout the pain-modulating circuit. The release of endogenous opioid ligands at spinal sites can produce an analgesic effect. These substances function in part by reducing transmitter release from the dorsal horn terminals of primary afferent nociceptors. They also direct postsynaptic inhibition of central neurons that are activated by noxious stimulation. Both mu and delta opioid receptor agonists block excitatory amino acid release from primary afferents. Endogenous opioids also contribute to pain modulation by inhibiting neuropeptide release from primary afferents. Such pain-modulating circuits offer the promise of rationally developed treatments based on manipulation of psychological variables, counter-irritation, and new, more selective drugs or drug combinations.